This is Navigating Cyber Risk podcast with me, John Riley and George Usi as your hosts. Join us as we explore the challenges faced by executives as they grapple with new and ever-changing cybersecurity mandates. Welcome to another episode of Navigating Cyber Risk. And today we have an amazing guest who is mom of two fur babies. She was an observer of the super blue blood moon and is now a novice astrophotographer. We have principal analyst in information security at Tucson University. Welcome to Wendy Epley. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you.
So we're going to jump in real quick here just because, we want to get that leading question, which is, how would you explain the difference between cybersecurity and cyber risks to somebody?
These words are often interchanged, but they are related concepts, and they refer, though, to different aspects of managing and addressing challenges with protecting information and systems. Cybersecurity is a set of practices and technologies aimed at protecting against cyber threats, while cyber risk management is a broader concept that involves assessing and mitigating the overall risk associated with using various technologies. So cyber risk or cybersecurity is actually the measures for this broader strategy of managing the risk, and that can include considerations of the likelihood and the potential impact of cyber incidents. And so organizations really need to implement robust cybersecurity measures as part of their broader cybersecurity management strategy in order to safeguard their assets and their operations.
So it goes beyond the technology and the blinking lights.
Very much so. Technology is only 10% of it. 90% is human. 85 to 95% of breaches are caused by human-enabled actions. So that's why there is a strong focus on the administrative, the human type of behaviors that are happening with cyber incidents.
We say we're all human after all, right? I guess it goes to coin that phrase.
We are.
Sorry?
We are, and we're imperfect. We do make mistakes, but the question really is, are we learning from those mistakes, right? So
to err is human.
Very much.
I think that there's probably a lot of pundits out there that are saying that we can stop this bad behavior, we can stop these hackers, but I'll steal a quote from somebody that mentioned this topic of bad behavior, which is, this isn't going to stop. There's a reason why we have Shakespeare in the world, right? So because people, they're in their human behavior, as much as we think we can, we can fix it and change the way that they behave. We're simply all human. So there's going to be chaos. There's going to be challenges. And I think that's kind of where we're at in terms of the cybersecurity world, right? These threat actors and they're just not going to disappear. But there's going to be behaviors within organizations as well. So that you just can't stop.
Yep. No, very, very true. And we tend to maybe be in a rush to getting work done or responding to an email that pops in. And that can be just one of the avenues of where vulnerability is introduced, because we're not stopping to think or analyze what is coming into our inbox. And so that is just one aspect of where a cyber risk may be present, is just, we got to slow down a little bit. Think about what it is that we're doing, thinking about what it is that's in the inbox. Yeah, it may look legit, but there might be something just off a little bit. So we really do need to take the time to analyze and make sure that we are looking for those threats, because our bad actors are coming up with new ways every single day of how they are going to exploit a vulnerability. And a lot of vulnerabilities come from the human side of things.
Well, and so to that, what do you think is the most significant cybersecurity risk facing companies today?
Well, we've heard a lot in the past about phishing attacks and ransomware and even credential stuffing. But I think, and this is just my humble opinion, one area that people may not be thinking about are vulnerabilities that come from Internet of Things or IoT devices. They are becoming more and more integrated into our homes and our businesses that sometimes they're not even considered when assessing cyber risk. Yet IoT devices can be exploited to gain unauthorized access, disrupt operations, or compromise data just as easily as an unpatched piece of software. There can be several factors that contribute to the increased risk associated with IoT devices. First, we've got the widespread adoption of IoT devices professionally and personally. So it can be hard to, one, identify all the IoT devices that may be impacting a space. And two, there's no standard set of security controls that manufacturers of IoT devices must use. And that brings us to really a second point, right? That many IoT devices are designed with a focus on functionality and cost, not security. So the lack of basic security practices such as strong authentication, encryption, regular software updates, that's what makes the IoT devices vulnerable to exploitation. The other thing too is IoT devices are typically limited in processing power and memory, and that can hinder the implementation of robust security measures, making it a challenge to include complex security protocols and updates. The devices are often connected to networks, which create a potential entry point for cyber attackers. And then you got to think about the broader impact of those breaches, which could result in potential violations of privacy regulations or even contractual obligations. IoT devices also have insecure user interfaces, which can be exploited by attackers to manipulate device settings, extract sensitive information, or even launch attacks. And this can be a problem in supply chains because regardless of the stage of the supply chain, it can lead to the distribution of compromised products, which can then make it very challenging to trace and mitigate security issues. And some IoT devices don't receive regular security updates or patches, which is another reason why it can make it challenging to mitigate security issues. And we can't ignore the physical vulnerabilities associated with IoT devices either. There are sometimes deployed in uncontrolled environments where they might be easily tampered with. And let's not ignore the smart devices on the wrist, or sitting near where there may be sensitive conversations being had and how those devices might be picking up those conversations. So we really want to maybe take a closer look at our IoT devices to mitigate those kinds of risks, monitor and manage the IoT device ecosystem, think about authentication and encryption mechanisms, and ensure that firmware and software updates are conducted regularly. Even if they can't be conducted on the device itself, maybe they can be done on the network or wherever it is that they're connected to, the system that they're connected to. So you need to ensure that security measures are integrated across the entire life cycle of the IoT device, from the manufacturing side to end-of-life disposal.
That's actually a really good, that's a really good challenge for a CFO role and a CEO role to get their hands dirty a little bit. Because I think that, they tend to, shy away from anything with a blinking light and leave it up to the technical folks. And when it comes to right-sizing budgets and, reviewing assets that maybe a little outdated, especially in IoT. That's almost mandatory. So hey, you CFO that 35-year-old chiller that's maybe in your basement or in your factory that has a internet connected biscuit on it that was designed 25 years ago. How secure is that? And what happens if that chiller is used for, or that machinery or manufacturing equipment is used to produce something that could, endanger lives, right? So these are those situations where, the right sizing of budgets and understanding where things need to be replaced or considered for replacement and risk management have to be on the agenda of the leadership teams. So, my question would be then, how do you think a CFO or a CEO should prioritize cyber risk? And the CFO obviously is going to have to budget it. So how do you see those two things happening?
Well, they both need to work together, right? The CFO shouldn't have the autonomy to make decisions that are going to sabotage the CEO's strategic direction. But they both should be involved in those conversations with the IT folks and understanding what is involved, right? Prioritizing cyber risk is a critical responsibility, not just for the CEO and the CFO, but for everyone. It really is a shared responsibility. However, as cybersecurity is integral to the overall resilience and success of an organization, CEOs need to not just understand how cyber threats and incidents can impact an organization's operations, the reputation, and the financial well-being. They need to demonstrate a commitment to cybersecurity, emphasizing its importance and promoting that culture of cybersecurity and cyber risk awareness. Cyber risk management should be second nature and really ingrained in the way business is done. One of the best ways to do this, I feel, is by adopting a federated cyber risk strategy. This will ensure that cybersecurity strategies align with and support the overall business objectives. CEOs also need to allocate sufficient resources, technology, financial, and personnel to support effective cybersecurity measures. They also need to adopt a cybersecurity standard that must be met by their vendors and their partners. And this is achieved by outlining the minimums expected in contractual agreements and also assessing that the cybersecurity posture of third parties is meeting those minimum requirements. We also want to see that CEOs are ensuring applicable cybersecurity regulations and standards are being adhered to. We want the CEOs to be transparent about the organization's cybersecurity efforts and any incidents that occur. Now, that doesn't mean we want to hear about every single ping and ding that comes across, but if they are significant or they pose an imminent threat, then yeah, be forthcoming. Do they have to become public? No, not necessarily, but address it. Don't just stick your head in the sand and pretend it's going to go away. It's an indicator that something needs to be addressed, that there is a weakness in the security posture, and let's take a look at it and address it before something bigger comes along. Let's see, what else should they do? Well, you also want to have that clear and thorough communication plan of how incidents are going to be addressed internally as well as externally. Uber, Uber's was it their CIO, their CISO, got into trouble. And so just pushing it under the rug or pretending like it didn't happen or making up things as it goes along, not a good strategy to do. Just be honest and truthful. Mistakes happen, just like we said. Let's move on. Let's make the changes that are needed to ensure that it doesn't happen again, right? Let's learn from those mistakes. And it may not have even been your fault. It just was something that happened. Again, move forward, right? foster that culture of continuous improvement and encourage that learning from past incidents. It doesn't matter whether they were minor situations or not, but we have to take that comprehensive and proactive approach to cybersecurity. And it's just so important that cybersecurity is viewed as an integral part of business strategy rather than a separate, isolated function.
I can imagine that the average leader is going to struggle with with a solid understanding of what their technical teams are doing. And this is probably where a lot of the gaps emerge. So let's take you through that question of the disaster. What does that journey look like? So things haven't gone right and you've had this disaster. What are most executives going to be feeling and experiencing after the hacker succeeds at actually stealing sensitive data that's important to their organization?
The after effects of a successful data breach where a hacker has gained unauthorized access and stolen sensitive data, they can be severe and wide-ranging. And it really kind of depends on what happened. The impact can extend the immediate breach incident, and it may affect individuals. It can affect not just the organization, but maybe other organizations in the pipeline, partners, and the broader ecosystem. And outside of the actual theft, executives also have to deal with the reputational damage and the regulatory consequences that could come from a breach. There are most likely going to be some operational disruptions responding to the breach. There's the financial impact to investigate, provide credit monitoring services to affected individuals. There's legal expenses related to potential lawsuits or settlements and regulatory fines. Responding to a data breach is complex and it's resource intensive. So this is not something that gets settled quickly. It's not something you can just say, all right, we dealt with it. So you have to expect this is going to be a long journey to bounce back from, but you can bounce back from it. And that's the thing to remember, is that it's not all gloom and doom. But the other thing to consider is that if the vulnerability that led to the breach is not addressed adequately, hackers may exploit the same or similar vulnerability in the future. Mm-hmm. And if communicating the breach is not handled right, it can exacerbate reputational damage. And despite if everything is done right and swiftly, losing customer and even employee confidence can impact an organization's market position. And then think about insurance premiums. Those could go up. Employee morale and productivity may go down. It really is a stressful journey for all involved.
You know, I've seen situations where insurances just simply won't renew. Say, I'm sorry, I can't sell you cyber insurance anymore. And for some businesses, it's devastating to their contractual obligations because a lot of contracts require that you hold it now. So that's almost
it really is.
Kind of a big challenge.
And how your information security or your cyber risk management strategy is structured can make all the difference in your insurance carrier providing you the coverage that you need. The University of Arizona some years ago, the cyber insurance carrier dropped our ransomware coverage. And we're like, wait a minute, why? What did we do? You know, we're doing everything we possibly can. And we ended up demonstrating to the insurance carrier how our strategy is structured and what we have in place, and the tool that we actually developed in-house, which is now a commercial product, but showing how that tool lends to managing and mitigating cyber risk. And we got our ransomware coverage back. So it really can make a difference in what are you doing proactively that ensures that you have done your due diligence in managing and addressing cyber risks within your organization?
Yeah, I definitely see the future to some degree of, especially in insurances and recent insurance issues around actual fires. Our legislature in California, because of California on fire situations, there's kind of a parallel there. The governor issued a requirement to insurance companies that they cannot drop insurance, fire insurance for these companies that had fires. Well, an incident is just a digital fire, right? So at what point is our government going to step in and say, you can't just drop your ransomware insurance like that. If you offered it before, you can't just take it away, because you're concerned about that industry having incident issues. And I think that's where we're headed there. But so with that, the future, what emerging trends do you think will have an impact on cybersecurity in the future?
There's so many, and I think it depends on which space you work in, right? For me, I think we're going to see more and more demand for compliance with the National Institute of Standards and Technology Special Publication 800-171 from government agencies and private industry. And for those of us who have been engaged in the controlled unclassified information world of things, we can't get through a day without mentioning 800-171. At least I can't, as hard as I try. But NIST 800-171 has been popping up in contracts, projects that have nothing to do with the U.S. Department of Defense. So this is not just a standard for the cybersecurity maturity model certification framework, but successful implementation and adherence to the objectives of NIST 800-171 are an indicator that an organization maintains a robust cybersecurity posture and they are able to protect sensitive information. And so I think we're going to see more and more evolution in that area.
Well, thank you for that. So tell us about you. I mean, we know that the Blue Blood Moon, you took a look at that, but tell us a little more about who you are. How'd you get to where you're at there at the university?
Let's see. I have been working in regulatory trade compliance for over 15 years. So that's the import-export side of things. And I've been doing that in higher ed since 2011. I first started out at the University of Miami as their first export compliance officer. Then about 3.5 years later, New York University poached me to be their first import and export compliance officer. And then my husband, who is originally from Arizona, was like a fish out of water being on the East Coast. So I had to get him back to his home state, and that's how we ended up in Tucson. But it was in 2019 that I crossed this bridge, or found this bridge to be able to cross over from the import-export compliance world into information security, because there's such a strong overlap. And so I have to really be appreciative of the person that hired me and given me this opportunity to come over and further evolve compliance and regulatory knowledge in the information security space. I really, really do enjoy it. And I still have that overlap with things.
That's great. It's always nice to have a new opportunity and something, maybe apply new ideas, or, old ideas to a new problem, I guess, using the export, the compliance for import exports and applying it to cybersecurity. So that's great.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are you currently working on that you're most excited about?
Oh, I'm involved in several things. I think one of the things that I'm most excited about right now is building an ecosystem of knowledge sharing at the University of Arizona, which we are calling CyBoRG. And CyBoRG stands for Cybersecurity Body of Risk Guardians. And this internal resource is going to be available or is available to our risk managers who want to work on aligning security practices within their unit against a particular standard or framework. I've already got a resource that outlines all 320 practices in NIST 800-171, even calculating an assessment score for them so that they can measure conformance to that standard. What makes this resource unique is that it maps to the university's information security governance and NIST 853 as well. So now we're seeing this broader association of where these controls might impact other areas. I'm also developing a handbook that will guide these risk managers in scoping for their projects and getting into the weeds, so to speak, of maturing their cybersecurity practices. Then, if they choose, they can use these resources with the university's information security risk management tool, which is provided by a company called CyBoRG, where they can work in an advanced view to incorporate the work they did in the CyBoRG resources. And the university's information security risk management program, it's a shared responsibility strategy. So it was intentional that CyBoRG be developed to work with other information security services.
Excellent. Is that available to the public as well, the CyBoRG?
No, this is internal to the university, but I would be happy to share what I'm doing and how our approach is with anybody who would like to do something similar in their organization.
Great.
But I'm retaining CyBoRG.
You and the movie
Because,
creator.
yeah, well, because resistance is futile. No, just kidding.
There's a Star Trek reference for you, George, just because you might not get that one.
That was one of the things my husband loved, is that I was a Star Trek enthusiast. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, I was a Battlestar Galactica guy, so, you know.
I got him into the new one. He didn't know about the new one. I had to tell him. I said, "You know about the new one, right?" And he was like, "What new one? There's only the one with, Buck Rogers." I said, "Well, you got to look at this one," and he was hooked. So,
yeah, I think everything that we've talked about is coming true, and I don't know how closely you watch the NIST CSF, but the new version, they've added what essentially is a governance component in the what essentially is the draft version. So, and that is exactly what we're talking about, here when we talk about compliance and risk management, and so there's little signs everywhere that the responsibility for cybersecurity is no longer isolated within the confined zones of the IT and security team. It's the whole organization has to pitch in, and that becomes a leadership challenge. So, so with the future in hand and knowing what what kind of actions do you think make sense for reducing their regulatory cyber risk? What would just a single action item that you think that they should do right away?
Read your contracts. I cannot tell you how many times I am engaging with people and I'm like, "Did you see this point in the contract?" No, I rely on somebody else to do that for me. And look, no one enjoys reading contracts, and there's often this bias that someone without a law degree cannot understand a contract. Well, I don't believe that, because I don't have a law degree and I read contracts all the time. But depending on the organization, a contract may be reviewed by several people, and each of them are looking for their own thing, but none of them are looking at the contract as a whole and how different areas overlap with another. Be mindful of those click-through agreements either. you want to ensure that what you're clicking I agree to isn't giving away your privacy rights, or that you're even saying it's okay that the company doesn't do patches to their software. So you got to be diligent in checking out the security posture of your third parties that you're entrusting your organization information to, or providing access to your network or other systems. Ensure that the contract has adequate information security clauses to protect against threats, and that they are protecting your organization assets. And when contracts come up for renewal, that's the time to renegotiate terms and shore up any weaknesses, especially as you each year should be reviewing the posture of your vendors, of your partners, and making sure that they have not had any vulnerabilities or significant threats in the past year that could be exposing your organization or your other assets to a unknown vulnerability. So definitely read those contracts. Don't be shy. It might take a little bit of an adjustment to understand it, but trust me, it is worth it in the end to make sure you know what's in those contracts.
Such a simple and easy ask. That's just wonderful. And I imagine that for our listeners, there are the contracts administration professionals are probably got up out of their chair and started applauding, as well as the attorney. So, those are the two groups that I've heard that from before. And so that is wonderful advice, wonderful action. And you're absolutely right. The biggest gaps that we see are, you can always point back to a contract. So thank you so much for that. That
You're
item
welcome.
is relevant.
So Wendy, here's a question for you that, if you were to be able to go back in time and tell your younger self some advice, what would that advice be?
I really think that it would be, don't ever let someone tell you that you can't do something. I think we can be knocked down by a lot of negativity that may come from within our own family, our friends, the people we engage with, but you know yourself the best, and don't zero in on what everybody else thinks. Zero in on what you know you can do. And if you feel you can do something, then do it.
Excellent. Thank you. So Wendy, where can people find you? How would you like them to reach out to you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. It's about my only social media platform that I'm on. But you can also go to the CyberAB marketplace and search for me there and find me on their listing as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, audience. Thank you for listening. And we hope you've learned something and enjoyed the conversation here. Wendy, again, thank you. This has been another great episode of Navigating Cyber Risk with your hosts, John and George, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
This was another amazing episode of Navigating Cyber Risk, powered by Omnistruct. Show us some love by subscribing and sharing today. Reach out to us with any comments, questions, or ideas about future shows by emailing us at podcast@omnistruct.com. Until next time, remember, governance is not a technology.